She is standing in the rain at midnight. No home, no money, no one to call. 60 seconds ago, she was dragged through a kitchen and thrown into an alley, not because she was bad at her job, but because she refused to let them sell her body. Right now, the man who did this to her is pouring himself a drink behind a locked door, convinced he has gotten rid of the problem. He does not know that the man sitting 30 feet away in a black SUV owns that building, that business, and every single contract that keeps it running. He does not know that man just watched everything through his window, and he certainly does not know that by sunrise his name will be erased from every record, every account, and every door in this city. One question started it all. One word changed everything. What happened? This is the story of the night an empire was destroyed, because one powerful man refused to look the other way. If this introduction captured your attention, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a single story. I have another incredible one ready for you tomorrow. Before you go, leave a comment telling me where in the world you are tuning in from. It is always amazing to see our global audience. Now let's continue the story. The rain that night felt like a judgment, a cold and relentless force that soaked her thin black work shirt until it was a second skin. Olivia walked with no destination, one arm wrapped tightly around her waist for a warmth that wasn't there. Her other hand clutched the strap of her olive green bag as if it were an anchor in a storm. Ahead of her, the dilapidated road was a dark river, broken only by the weak, flickering streetlights that threw jaundiced circles onto the cracked asphalt. The tears came freely now. She had no energy left to hide them. Strands of her dark hair were plastered across her face. The beige, company-issued apron was still knotted around her hips, a damp and wrinkled reminder of her failure. Her black pants were drenched, and her cheap sneakers made a pathetic squelching sound with every single step. She was the perfect image of what she had become, a woman with absolutely nowhere else in the world to go. She had lasted 8 months. For 8 long months, she had worked at the Eclipse Lounge, serving drinks to men whose eyes lingered for too long, men who slid cash across the sticky bar with unspoken and ugly propositions attached. They were men who mistook professional courtesy for personal permission. For all those 8 months, she had kept her eyes down, performed her duties flawlessly, and politely refused anything more. It had not been enough to save her. The position came with a small room upstairs that was hardly larger than a storage closet, but it was a space that was hers alone. Inside, there was only a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and a lock on the door. That simple lock was her shield. It symbolized the line between being a waitress and being merchandise. It was the reason she could say no and still have a safe place to sleep at night. But tonight, she had said no for the last time. The club's manager, a tall man in a sharp suit who always wore a smile that suggested he held a secret you did not, had started bringing in different girls 3 weeks ago. He called them dancers. Olivia knew their true purpose. She had seen the transactions in the back rooms and heard the quiet negotiations. She had watched as large amounts of money were exchanged for things that had nothing to do with drinks. He had approached her directly just last week. "You have a very marketable look," he had said, his body leaning casually against the bar as she polished glasses. "Some of our best customers are asking about you. You could be making real money here." She had turned him down respectfully. He had continued to pressure her. She had refused him a second time. This evening, he had decided he was done asking. "Pack your things," he had ordered, appearing in the doorway of her room without the courtesy of a knock. "You are finished." "What? Why are you doing this?" "If you do not want to work," he said coldly, "then you do not get to stay." "But I do my work," she pleaded. "Not in the way that I require you to." She attempted to reason with him, to remind him that she had never consented to any duties beyond serving tables. But he was already looking away from her. He had already motioned for 2 of his security guards to come and escort her from the premises. They had granted her a mere 5 minutes to collect her life. Then they had marched her down the rear staircase, through the bustling kitchen, and out into the alley, just as the first drops of rain had begun to fall. The deadbolt clicked into place behind her. No final paycheck, no words of apology, no second chance. There was only the rain. She walked because she had no other choice. She had no family to call for help, and no friends she could burden at such a late hour. The small amount of money she had managed to save was in her bag, perhaps enough for a week's stay at a hostel, if she was fortunate enough to find one. But maybe it would not be enough. The streetlights overhead buzzed and sputtered, with many of them burned out entirely, leaving long, dangerous stretches of the road consumed by absolute darkness. Cars drove by from time to time, their headlights cutting bright paths through the downpour, but not one of them ever slowed. This was not the sort of neighborhood where good Samaritans stopped to offer assistance. Olivia did not hold it against them. She just kept walking, placing one foot in front of the other as rain streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the tears she no longer tried to suppress. Her throat was tight with a silent scream, and her chest felt constricted with grief. She had fought so desperately to hold on to her dignity, to draw a line that no one could cross, and that very act of defiance had cost her everything. That was when she heard it, the quiet, deep hum of a powerful engine slowing to a crawl just behind her. She did not look back. Women in her position learned early on not to acknowledge that kind of attention, but the sound did not go away. It grew closer, its approach steady and deliberate. The black luxury SUV pulled up alongside her, its form sleek and imposing, with rain beating on its polished black paint like liquid diamonds. It was the type of vehicle that was utterly alien to a place like this. It was too expensive, too immaculate, too formidable. The windows were tinted to a shade so dark that they were like black mirrors. It maintained her pace perfectly. Olivia's heart began to hammer against her ribs. She picked up her pace. The SUV remained right beside her. She stopped. The vehicle stopped as well. For a very long moment, nothing at all happened. There was only the sound of the rain lashing the pavement and the nearly silent idle of the expensive engine. Olivia stood there, completely frozen, soaked through to her skin, her bag clutched to her chest like a shield. Her heart was beating so forcefully she could feel the pulse in her throat. Then, the rear passenger window slid down with a quiet, smooth motion. Inside, a man was sitting. He wore a tailored black suit, the kind of suit that cost more than she had earned in the last year. His shirt was a brilliant white, unfastened at the collar, with no tie. His face was all hard lines and sharp angles, with dark eyes that watched her without blinking, without softening, without looking away. He possessed the sort of presence that could dominate a room without him ever having to move a muscle. He was dangerous, controlled, and undeniably powerful. He offered no smile. He did not lean toward her. He simply stared at her with an unnerving intensity, as if he were calculating whether or not she was worth his time. Then, he finally spoke. What happened? His voice was low and calm, but it sliced through the sound of the storm like a razor. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should have kept walking. She should have ignored him completely. She should have followed every single survival instinct that was now screaming inside her head. But she did not move. Maybe it was the crushing exhaustion. Maybe it was the absolute desperation. Or maybe it was the way he had asked, not like he was demanding an answer or offering pity, but just asking, as if he genuinely wanted to know the truth. She turned her body to face him, the rain pouring over her face like a veil. And for the very first time that night, someone was looking at her as if she was a person who mattered. Her voice broke. She swallowed against the lump in her throat. She tried again. I lost my job. The man's severe expression did not change in the slightest. He continued to study her for another long moment, his intense gaze moving from her drenched uniform to the worn bag in her hands, and finally to the tears she could not conceal. Get in, he said. The words were a command, not an invitation. Olivia froze in place. It was late. This was the kind of night that served as a cautionary tale, a lesson in why you do not trust strangers, especially not strangers in expensive cars. But she was already soaked, already defeated, and completely out of viable options. Something in his steady gaze told her that refusing this particular man might be the very last mistake she would ever make. Olivia did not enter the vehicle. Not immediately. She remained on the sidewalk in the storm, water dripping from her hair, staring at the open door of the SUV as if it were a predator's jaw waiting to snap shut. The interior was upholstered in immaculate black leather. It looked dry. It looked warm. A wave of heated air drifted out, carrying the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something intangible. It was the scent of power, of absolute control. The man waited for her. He did not repeat his command, nor did he try to coax or persuade her. He simply sat there, watching her with that unreadable expression, one arm resting on his knee as she wrestled with her decision. "I don't," Olivia began, but her voice trailed off. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed without hesitation. "You do not." "Then why would you help me?" A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I have not yet decided if I am going to." The sheer honesty of his response was jarring. Most men would lie. They would promise her safety, they would promise kindness, they would promise all the things they had no intention of ever providing. This man offered her nothing at all, except a seat out of the rain and an unanswered question. Olivia looked down the long, dark road. There was only more rain, more darkness, and more nowhere. She got into the car. The door closed behind her with a solid, heavy sound, immediately muffling the storm to a distant drumming on the roof. The warmth enveloped her instantly, and she began to shiver violently as she realized just how cold she was. The man did not look at her. He tapped twice on the glass partition that separated them from the driver. The SUV pulled away from the curb and smoothly rejoined the road. "Where are we going?" Olivia asked, her voice just above a whisper. "You tell me." She had no answer to give him. He turned then to face her, truly face her, and she was able to see him clearly for the first time. He had dark hair that was slightly damp around the edges, as if he too had been out in the rain just recently. His features were strong, his face marked by a thin white scar that cut cleanly across his left eyebrow. He might have been 40 years old, or he might have been older. It was impossible to be certain. Men like him did not seem to age in the same way as other people. They simply hardened over time. "You worked at the Eclipse Lounge," he said. It was not a question, it was a statement of fact. Olivia's heart felt like it stopped beating. "How did you know that?" "The apron." He nodded his head toward her waist. "And I am familiar with the uniform." She looked down. The beige apron was still tied around her, the club's Eclipse logo stitched in a faded black thread right across the front. She had been so distraught that she had forgotten she was even wearing it. "I am taking it off," she said in a rush, her cold fingers fumbling with the stubborn knot. "Leave it." She froze. "I want to see it when we get there," he added, his voice flat. "Get where?" But he had already turned away from her, pulling out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with a swift and practiced efficiency. He made a call and began to speak in rapid, fluent Portuguese. His voice was a low rumble, too indistinct for her to understand most of the words. But one name came through with chilling clarity. Eclipse. A cold weight settled in Olivia's stomach. "You are taking me back to that place." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of pure dread. When he finished his call, he turned his gaze on her. "You have a problem with going back?" "Yes." A painful lump formed in her throat. "They got rid of me. They kicked me out on the street. I am not allowed back there." "Who told you to leave?" "The manager did. I never learned his real name. Everyone just called him Señor." An expression she could not read crossed the man's face. It wasn't shock. It was something far more chilling. "Tell me why he let you go." Olivia found herself hesitating. This was always the difficult part, the part that made her seem gullible and foolish, as if she did not grasp the fundamental rules of the world. "Because I refuse to," she whispered, her eyes fixed on her own trembling hands. He was expecting more from me than just pouring drinks. The car filled with a heavy silence. "And you said no?" the man asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. "I did. How long did this go on?" "For about 3 weeks, maybe a little longer. He started pressuring me right after he hired those new girls." The man settled deeper into the leather seat, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "What new girls are you talking about?" "He called them dancers," Olivia explained. But then she immediately took it back. At least that is what he told everyone they were. But their job involved much more than just dancing. What else were they expected to do? She did not want to voice the truth. She did not want to be the one to articulate the ugly reality. His stare, however, was unwavering and patient, a silent demand for an answer. "They were entertaining the clients," she said, choosing her words with immense care. "It happened in the private rooms on the second floor." "The same level where your room was?" Olivia simply nodded. While the man's stoic expression remained unchanged, the entire atmosphere inside the car shifted. He was now paying a different kind of attention. He took out his phone again, typed a short message, and then put it away. "You were living above the nightclub," he stated. "They provided me with a room when I first got the job. That was part of my arrangement. I work behind the bar, and in return, I have a safe place to sleep. And when you declined to expand your duties," he said, his voice completely devoid of emotion, "they revoked your living arrangement. They took the room tonight." "Yes." A long silence stretched between them as he gazed out the window, watching the rain-slicked city streets glide by. Olivia had no way of reading his expression, no clue if he thought she was telling the truth, if he felt any sympathy, or if any of this registered as important to him at all. At last, he broke the silence. "How many months did you work there?" 8 months. "Were you aware of what that place really was when you took the job?" "I understood that it was a nightclub. I was not naive." She paused, trying to find the proper way to explain. "I knew it was not a completely safe environment, but I desperately needed the income. They gave me their word that my only job would be to serve drinks. That was the only thing I ever consented to do." "And you honored that side of the bargain." "I did my best to." "No, you succeeded," he corrected her. "And that is the reason you are sitting in this car right now." Olivia looked over at him, her face a mask of confusion. "I do not understand what you mean." He did not provide an immediate answer, choosing instead to observe her with those intense, inscrutable eyes. Then, he shifted forward, resting his elbows on his knees and lacing his fingers together. "The Eclipse Lounge," he stated with deliberate slowness, "is much more than just a nightclub. I am aware of that." "No, you are not." His voice became even deeper. "It serves as a front, a place where money is laundered, a place where young women are moved around. Things happen there that are never supposed to happen, and a certain person is responsible for ensuring that they do not." Olivia felt her throat tighten and go dry. "Who is that person?" A smile touched the man's lips, but it contained no trace of warmth. "Me." That single word seemed to hang in the air between them, sharp as a knife's edge. Olivia's grip on her handbag became painfully tight. She had no idea who this man truly was, but a sudden, chilling understanding washed over her. It explained the luxurious sport utility vehicle. It explained the perfect tailoring of his suit. It explained why ordinary people would likely step off the sidewalk to avoid his path. "You own the Eclipse," she breathed, the words barely audible. "I own many things," he replied, leaning back again. "The Eclipse is merely one of them. And if your story is accurate, then it seems someone has been operating my establishment as if it were their own personal property." "My story is true," Olivia insisted, her voice gaining urgency. "I promise you, I am not making this up. I am well aware that you are not." "How can you be so sure?" He made a small gesture in her direction. "Because you are still wearing your work apron. Because you are drenched from the rain and crying, and you clearly have nowhere else to turn. Because women who invent stories like this do not typically find themselves wandering lost and alone in a downpour. The vehicle began to slow down. Olivia glanced out the window, and her stomach twisted into a painful knot. They had returned. The Eclipse Lounge loomed before them, its neon signs casting vibrant pink and blue reflections on the wet asphalt. A muffled, heavy beat from the music inside pulsed through the walls. Small groups of people lingered near the entrance, sharing cigarettes and laughing, completely unaware of the unfolding drama. "I cannot go back inside," Olivia pleaded, a wave of panic rising in her chest. "Please." "He will not lay a hand on you," the man assured her as he opened his car door. "You will stay right beside me, and you will not say a single word unless I instruct you to. What is the reason we are here?" He gave her one final steady look before he stepped out into the pouring rain. "Because I am interested in meeting the individual who believes he has the authority to run my club." Olivia remained frozen in her seat. The man was now standing outside the vehicle, the rain quickly darkening the fabric on the shoulders of his expensive suit as he waited for her. The door was still open. The club's music throbbed into the night, a relentless, bass-heavy rhythm designed to swallow conversations that were never meant to be overheard. "I cannot do it," she repeated, her voice softer this time. He bent down, placing one hand on the frame of the door. "You can, and you are going to. He is going to see me. He will not dare to do anything," the man stated. The conviction in his tone was absolute and unwavering. "Not as long as you are with me." Olivia's hands were shaking as she clutched her bag. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to remain in the safety of the car, to beg the driver to take her anywhere but here, to just vanish into the stormy night and never look back. But she had sealed her fate the moment she accepted his offer. She had already placed her trust in this stranger, with the formidable eyes and the softly spoken threats. She took a breath and stepped out into the rain. The man shut the door firmly behind her and began moving toward the entrance of the club. Olivia rushed to match his long strides, her wet sneakers making splashing sounds in the puddles. The apron was still secured around her waist, a public badge of her recent humiliation. She felt utterly exposed, certain that every person smoking outside would recognize her as the girl who had been unceremoniously ejected just an hour before. But no one even glanced her way. All of their attention was fixed on him. The conversations near the entrance faltered and died out. Cigarettes were left hanging, forgotten, halfway to their owner's lips. A woman dressed in a skin-tight red dress instinctively took a step backward. The two bouncers guarding the door, both powerfully built, covered in tattoos, and normally as immovable as statues, snapped to attention. "Señor Race," one of them uttered, his voice strained with tension. The man, Race, offered no acknowledgement, simply striding past them as if they were nothing more than inanimate objects. Olivia followed closely behind him, keeping her head lowered and her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. The guards made no move to stop her. They did not even seem to register her presence. Their gazes remained locked on Race until he had vanished through the doorway. Once inside, the music was a physical force. It pressed down on Olivia's chest and vibrated deep within her bones, making it nearly impossible to think clearly. The club was overflowing with people, a sea of bodies swaying on the dance floor under the sharp cuts of strobe lights that sliced through a haze of artificial fog. Bartenders moved with frantic speed behind the same long marble counter where she had spent the last 8 months of her life, the very same counter where she had been informed that her work was no longer sufficient. Race navigated the dense crowd with the effortless grace of a shark gliding through water. People instinctively moved aside, creating a path for him without consciously realizing they were doing so, some primal instinct warning them to clear his way. Olivia stayed right behind him, the damp fabric of her uniform clinging to her skin and her bag held tight against her chest like a shield. She recognized some of the faces in the crowd, women she had worked alongside, regular customers she had served countless drinks to. Not a single person made eye contact with her. It was as if they either did not know who she was or were deliberately choosing to ignore her. And then she saw him. Senor. He was standing close to the VIP section, laughing at a remark made by a woman in a shimmering gold dress. He was tall and possessed a polished kind of handsomeness, dressed in a black suit that was clearly custom-tailored. His dark hair was combed back smoothly, and his smile was relaxed and self-assured. He was a man who fully expected the world to yield to his desires, simply because it always had. He had not seen them yet. Race paused at the edge of the dance floor, casually placing his hands in his pockets. He scanned the club with the detached air of someone examining a property they had long forgotten they possessed. His jaw was clenched tightly. His gaze traveled in a slow, methodical arc from the bar to the exclusive VIP area and finally to the rear hallway that led to the private rooms. "Which one is he?" he asked, his eyes still sweeping the room, not looking at Olivia. She did not have to ask who he was talking about. Her throat felt as dry as sandpaper. "He is the one in the black suit, standing over by the couches." Race gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You will remain behind me." He began to move forward again. Olivia's heart rate skyrocketed. This was really happening. It was not a dream. A frantic urge seized her to reach out and stop him, to tell him that she had changed her mind, that they could just turn around and walk away, that confronting Senor would not solve anything. But her legs continued to carry her forward, trailing in his wake, moving through the pulsing crowd and straight toward the man who had cast her out into the rain like a piece of trash. Senor finally noticed them when they were less than 10 feet away. His easy smile did not waver. If anything, it seemed to broaden. He gracefully excused himself from the woman in the gold dress and took a step forward, his arms held slightly open in a gesture of welcome. "Can I help you tonight?" he inquired, his voice as smooth and rehearsed as a recording. He still had not recognized Olivia. His entire focus was on Race, his mind clearly working to identify this imposing stranger. Race came to a halt directly in front of him. "You are in charge of this club?" "I am the manager, yes," Senor replied, his smile shifting to one of professional courtesy. "Are you interested in a table? I am afraid our VIP section is at capacity this evening, but perhaps I could—" "I am not here for a table." A subtle change in Race's tone caused Senor to hesitate. The smile remained fixed in place, but his eyes grew sharp with calculation. "In that case, what is it I can do for you? You can start by explaining who authorized you to terminate my employees." The smile finally fractured. Senor's eyes darted for a split second to Olivia, then immediately back to Race. A slow wave of recognition washed over his face, quickly followed by utter confusion. "I apologize. Who are you?" "Camilo Race." The name landed with the force of a physical impact. All the color drained from Senor's face. His confidence evaporated so completely and so quickly that Olivia almost found herself feeling a flicker of pity for him. Almost. His mouth fell open, then shut, then opened once more. "Senor Race, I had no idea you were—" "You had no idea I was coming," Camillo stated, letting the words settle. "That is the entire problem." Of course that was it. "I only meant," Senor stammered, attempting to regain his composure, trying to slide his professional mask back into place. His gaze shot around the club, searching for any support that was clearly not on its way. "Is something amiss? Has someone filed a complaint?" He rushed the words out. "I can assure you, whatever the issue is, I will resolve it." Camillo aimed a gesture toward Olivia, but his eyes remained locked on Senor. "Her," he said simply. "Tell me why she is not at her station." For the first time, Senor actually looked at her. He truly saw her standing there. His face was a canvas of shifting emotions. First came surprise, then a flash of irritation, followed by raw anger, which finally melted into a look of pure panic when he connected her presence to the man who owned the entire building. He began, clearing his throat. She did not prove to be a good fit with our existing team. Camillo's expression didn't change. Why not? She was unwilling to take on certain additional duties. What duties were those? Senor paused, his hesitation hanging heavy in the air. The music was a physical force around them, and now people were beginning to notice the charged conversation, the undeniable tension. The woman dressed in gold was gone. Olivia saw two of the bartenders stop polishing glasses to stare at them. This establishment offers more than beverages, Senor said, choosing his words with extreme care. We are in the business of providing entertainment, premium experiences for our most valued clients. He glanced at Olivia. She was not interested in being a part of that. She is a waitress, Camillo said, his voice completely flat. She was hired to be a waitress. The contract she signed was for the role of a waitress. Senor blinked, thrown off balance. Yes, however. So you terminated her employment because she refused to violate the terms of her contract. It is not quite that straightforward. It is precisely that straightforward. Camillo's voice never rose, yet it sliced through the club's noise like a razor. You coerced a member of your staff into providing services of a sexual nature. She declined. You then evicted her, casting her out onto the street without any severance pay or prior warning. Is that an accurate summary of events? Senor's jaw tightened and released. With all due respect, Señor, you do not grasp the fundamentals of how this business operates. Oh, I understand it perfectly, Camillo replied, taking a single step forward. What I fail to comprehend is who gave you the impression that this was acceptable behavior. No one gave me that impression. Senor sputtered. I operate this club in the way that it must be run, the way that generates profit. My profit? Yes, Camillo agreed softly. Your profit, which I see you have been steadily increasing each month by exploiting the very women who came to this place seeking legitimate work, not to be put up for sale. The accusation was a physical thing in the space between them. A deep flush crept up Senor's neck. That is not what is happening. These women understand what they are agreeing to. They are eager for the work. They earn very good money. He pointed a trembling finger toward Olivia. She is the only one who has ever made a complaint. Because she is the only one who dared to say no, Camillo countered. She is the only one who was naive enough to believe a place like this could survive on serving drinks alone. The words tumbled out, sharp and defensive. The instant they left his mouth, Senor appeared to grasp his monumental error. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He took a small, involuntary step backward. Camillo's face remained a mask of stone. Turn off the music. What? Turn the music off. Now. Senor looked around in a state of desperation, then frantically signaled to someone Olivia could not see. 10 seconds later, the beat died. The resulting silence was absolutely deafening. Every single person in the crowded club turned to look at them. Camillo raised his voice, just enough for it to carry across the room. Everybody out! Now! For a moment, nobody moved. The crowd just stared at Camillo as if he were speaking a language they could not possibly comprehend. A faint echo of the music still vibrated from the speakers, a ghost of the rhythm that had been shaking the floors just moments before. Someone near the bar laughed nervously. A glass clinked against a table. Camillo did not repeat his command. Instead, he drew his phone from his pocket, pressed one button, and lifted it to his ear. His gaze never wavered from Senor's terrified face. Clear the building, he said in Portuguese. Everyone, you have 2 minutes. He hung up the call. That was the moment people began to understand that something serious was happening. The security team emerged first. These were not the 2 guards from the main entrance, but an entirely different group, 6 of them, possibly more. They materialized from the shadowed corners of the club as if they had been waiting for this exact signal, moving through the crowd with an efficient and professional purpose. They began ushering patrons toward the exits with voices that were firm and hands that were even firmer. Let's go, people. It is time to leave. The club is closed. Everybody out now. Move along. The crowd pushed back at first. There were confused protests and mumbled complaints. Half-empty drinks were left behind on tables. A couple of angry voices shouted, but the security team did not engage in negotiations. Within 60 seconds, the dance floor was rapidly clearing. Within 90 seconds, the entire bar area was empty. The woman in the gold dress snatched her purse from a stool and hurried to the door, never once looking back. Olivia remained frozen in place next to Camillo, watching the club empty out like a basin being drained of water. Women she had worked alongside filed past her, some still in their server uniforms, others dressed in the revealing outfits Senor insisted upon for the premium entertainment. A few of them met her eyes for a fleeting moment. Most of them did not. Senor's panic was now a tangible thing. His hands were twitching uncontrollably at his sides. Beads of sweat formed along his hairline, ignoring the chill of the air conditioning. "Señor, please," he pleaded. "If I have done something to offend you in some way, be quiet." Señor's mouth snapped closed with an audible click. The last of the customers were herded out. The guards assumed positions at every exit, crossing their arms over their chests, their faces completely blank. One of them locked the heavy front door from the inside. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed through the vast, now silent club. Camillo calmly surveyed the empty space, the scattered glasses, the fog machine still lazily pumping mist over the deserted dance floor, the colored lights reflecting off mirrors and chrome fixtures. He began to walk slowly toward the bar, his hands still tucked in his pockets, absorbing every last detail. Olivia followed him simply because she did not know what else she could possibly do. Behind them both, Senor stood glued to his spot, his arrogant confidence completely and utterly shattered. Camillo paused at the bar, running a single finger along the smooth marble countertop. "How much revenue does this establishment generate in a single month?" Senor stammered, his voice thin. "Approximately 200,000 reais, sometimes more. It really depends on the month." "And what portion of that revenue comes from the sale of liquor?" There was only silence. "How much?" Camillo asked again. "Perhaps 30%. "So 70%, Camillo stated, "comes from the girls." Senor swallowed, his throat working. "The entertainment services are extremely popular. We cater to high-end clientele. Discretion is always guaranteed. It is a very lucrative business model." "I did not ask you for a sales pitch." Camillo pivoted to face him directly. "I asked you for the numbers. Is it 70%? "Yes, approximately." "And what percentage of their earnings do you pay the girls?" 20% of what they bring in, plus their tips." 20%, Camillo repeated, his voice dangerously low. 20% of the money they earn for you by selling their bodies. "They are independent contractors," Senor insisted weakly. "They have the right to choose their clients. They establish their own boundaries. Everything is consensual." Camillo's laugh was a cold, sharp sound completely devoid of humor. "Except for when it is not. Except for when one of the girls says no and you decide to throw her out on the street." "She was not one of the entertainers. She was an employee," Camillo cut in. "She was an employee who signed a contract, who performed her duties, and you punished her for refusing to perform a duty she never once agreed to." Camillo took another step closer. "Where is her room?" "Upstairs, on the second floor. But all of her belongings are—" "Show me." Senor looked as if he was about to be physically ill. "Of course, right this way." He guided them toward a hallway in the back, past the restrooms and a large storage closet, to a narrow set of stairs that Olivia knew all too well. She had climbed those stairs every single night for 8 long months, her body exhausted and aching, feeling nothing but gratitude for having a door that she could lock behind her. The second floor was quieter and much dimmer than downstairs, just a long corridor with a series of doors on each side. Some of the doors were ajar, showing tiny rooms that were barely large enough to hold a single bed. Others were closed, but sounds still filtered through them. Muffled voices, distant music, the steady, rhythmic creaking of bed frames. Olivia felt her chest constrict with a familiar tightness. She had lived right next to this. She had heard it every single night. Senor came to a halt in front of a door near the far end of the hall. This one was hers. "Open it," Camillo commanded. Senor fumbled with a large keyring, finally selected the correct one, and unlocked the door. It swung open to reveal a room that was completely empty. It was not just empty of Olivia's possessions. It was utterly stripped bare. The mattress was gone from the frame. The small lamp was gone. Even the curtain rod had been removed from above the window. There was nothing left but 4 bare walls and a cold concrete floor. "Where are her things?" Camillo's voice was now dangerously quiet. I had them removed," Senor stammered. "It is the standard procedure when an employee is terminated." "Where are they now?" "They are in storage, downstairs. I can go and retrieve them for her." "If you threw her out with nothing to her name—" "She took a bag with her," Senor interrupted. "I saw her with it." "One bag," Camillo stated. "After 8 months of working for you, she left with one single bag." Camillo turned his head to look at Olivia. "Is that true?" She could only nod, words failing her completely. Camillo stared into the vacant room for a long, silent moment. Then he walked back out into the hallway, pulled his phone out a second time, and made another call. "I need a complete audit," he said into the phone. "The Eclipse Lounge, starting tonight. I want every contract, every single payment record, every girl who is currently working here. I want their names, their ages, how long they have been employed, and what they were told they would be doing when they were hired." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "No, I will wait here. Bring the entire team now." He ended the call and fixed his cold gaze on Senor. "You are going to sit downstairs, and you will answer every last question they ask you. And if I discover that you have been involved in trafficking minors or forcing women into this life, I promise you, they will never find your body." Senor's face turned a sickly shade of gray. "I swear to you, everyone here is of legal age. Everyone consents to be here. I am running a clean operation." "You run nothing." Camillo's voice was pure ice. "You are a manager who forgot who he works for, and you are about to receive a very painful lesson about what happens when you abuse that privilege." He turned his head and gestured to one of the guards standing nearby. "Take him downstairs. Lock him inside the office. He is not to leave. He is not to make any calls. He is not to speak to anyone at all until my people have arrived." "Yes, Senor." The guard took a firm grip on Senor's upper arm. Senor opened his mouth as if to protest, but then seemed to think better of it. He allowed himself to be led away, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat, all the fight having completely drained out of him. When they were finally alone in the quiet hallway, Camillo turned and looked directly at Olivia for the first time. "You lived here for 8 months?" She gave a small nod. He gestured with his head toward the closed doors that lined the corridor. "Listening to that every single night?" Her voice broke. "Yes. And you still said no, I am not." She shook her head. "I am not that. I am just a waitress." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You are more than that," he said, stating it as a simple fact. "Most people in your position break. You did not." Olivia felt completely empty, unable to form a reply. The entire world felt tilted on its side. Everything that had unfolded in the last 2 hours was a nightmare she could not wake from. The pouring rain, the dark sport utility vehicle, the raw confrontation. Watching Senor completely fall apart in front of the man he had been robbing blind. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Camillo glanced down the long hallway, then his eyes returned to her. Now, I clean up this mess, and you decide what you want. What I want? You cannot stay here, he stated plainly. The room is gone. The job is gone. But you are owed 8 months of back wages for the services you refuse to provide. On top of that, there is severance for an illegal termination, plus compensation for severe emotional distress. He took out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. Let's call it 50,000 reais. Olivia felt her knees threaten to give out from under her. 50,000, Camillo said, letting the number hang in the air. Or, he continued, you stay. You can help me understand who else has been harmed in this place. If it comes to it, you will have to testify, and I will personally ensure you are protected while you do it. Olivia just stared at him, completely baffled. Why would you do that for me? His answer was direct. Because you are the only person in this entire building who has told the truth. He held her gaze. And I need to discover exactly how deep this corruption goes. Outside, a low rumble of thunder echoed through the city. Inside, in that quiet hallway, Olivia made her choice. I will help you. Camillo gave a single sharp nod. Then let's head back downstairs. My people will be here any moment, and you are going to tell them absolutely everything. The office was surprisingly small. Senor was seated behind a desk buried in clutter, his hands folded neatly in front of him, his face ashen. Two imposing guards stood by the door, arms crossed over their chests, their expressions like stone. The room was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and expensive whiskey, and a half-finished bottle on the desk caught the glare from a lamp. Camilo leaned against the wall beside the window, watching the street below. Down on the street, a line of black sedans was beginning to pull up to the curb. His people had arrived. It was the audit team he had summoned. Through the window, Olivia could see them. They were men and women dressed in dark business suits, carrying laptops and boxes of files, all of them moving with the focused efficiency of soldiers. She sat stiffly in a metal folding chair directly across from Senor. She was still in her damp work uniform, the apron tied at her waist like a symbol of shame she could not take off. Her bag was on the floor by her feet. It contained everything she owned in the entire world. Camilo had not said a word for at least 5 minutes. The silence was far worse than any shouting. It pressed down on the room with a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. Senor kept shooting nervous glances at him, then looking away, then looking back, as if waiting for something. Permission to speak. Permission to try and explain himself. Finally, Camilo turned away from the window. How long have you worked for me? He asked. Senor had to clear his throat to speak. 3 years, Senor Reyes. And in those 3 years, how many times have I personally visited this location? This is the first time. Camilo let that answer settle in the heavy silence. The first time. So you must have thought I did not care what happened here? No, no, of course not, Senor stammered. I believed I was doing what you wanted, maximizing our profits, growing the business. Camilo's voice was ice. By turning it into a brothel. It is not a brothel, Senor said, a little too quickly. It is a gentleman's club that offers additional services. It is very high-end, completely discreet, and completely legal. Legal? Camilo's tone was dangerously flat. You keep using that word, but legal does not mean it is right, and it certainly does not mean it was authorized by me. I was given operational freedom, the last regional manager said. I do not care what he said, Camilo interrupted, pushing himself off the wall and walking toward the desk. I care what you did. How many girls are currently working in the rooms upstairs? Senor hesitated. 15, perhaps 16. You do not know for sure. Some of them come and go. They work as independent contractors. How many of them are under a contract like hers? Camilo asked, nodding toward Olivia. How many were hired to be waitresses and were then pressured into doing more? Silence. How many? Camillo's hand came down flat on the desk. The sound was not loud, but it was sharp enough to make Senor physically flinch. I do not know for certain. A few, maybe 5 or 6, started out as regular staff and then transitioned. Transitioned? Camillo repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something foul. That is a very delicate word for it. They wanted the work, Senor insisted. The money is much better. I never forced anyone to do anything. Olivia's hands tightened into fists in her lap. The lie was so smooth, so well practiced. It was as if he had told it so many times that he had actually started to believe it himself. She is sitting right there, Camillo said quietly, his voice low and threatening, and she is going to tell me if you are lying right now. Senor's eyes darted toward Olivia. She met his terrified gaze and held it. There were others, she said. Her voice was much stronger than she had expected. I was not the only one. There was a girl named Beatrice. She worked at the bar with me for 2 months. And then one day, she was working upstairs. I asked her what happened. She told me she did not have a choice. That is not true, Senor cut in immediately. Beatrice came to me herself, asking for more hours. I offered her an opportunity, and she took it, Senor finished. She was crying in the bathroom the very next week, Olivia continued, her voice steady. She told me she desperately needed the money. She said you told her the bar was not making enough in tips to keep her on full time unless she agreed to help out upstairs. That is a complete misrepresentation of our conversation. Is Beatrice still working here? Camillo asked, his eyes locked on Senor. No, Senor admitted quietly. She left about a month ago. She left or she was fired? She just stopped showing up for her shifts. Camillo's jaw muscle clenched. He pulled out his phone again, typed a quick message, and then looked at one of the stone-faced guards. Find her. I want her full name, her last known address, and her phone number. I want to speak with her tonight. The guard nodded once and stepped out into the hallway. Camillo turned his attention back to Senor. Who else? I do not understand what you... Who else did you coerce? Camillo's voice was sharp. Who else came to this place for legitimate work and ended up in one of those rooms because you threatened their job? No one, Senor pleaded. I swear. The others all knew exactly what they were signing up for. Then you will not mind if I ask them myself, Camillo said, moving toward the door. Because my team is about to begin interviewing every single girl in this building. And if even one of them tells a story that sounds like hers, he said, gesturing to Olivia, then you and I are going to have a much longer conversation in a place that is far less comfortable than this. Senor's carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. Please, Senor Reyes, I was just trying to run a profitable business here. The overhead on this location is enormous. The liquor license alone costs a fortune. I do not care about your overhead, Camillo shot back. I care that you used my money, my property, and my name to exploit women who trusted you to honor their employment contracts. It was not exploitation. She would be homeless tonight, Camillo's voice cut through the air like a razor. Walking in the rain with absolutely nowhere to go because you threw her out for refusing to prostitute herself for your profit. That is not business. That is cruelty. The word just hung there in the suffocating silence. Olivia felt something inside her chest finally release. Someone was saying it out loud. Someone was finally calling it what it truly was. After 8 long months of being told that she was naive, that she just did not understand how the real world worked, that her personal boundaries were completely unreasonable, someone with power was saying that she had been right all along. A sharp knock on the office door interrupted the tense moment. One of the guards opened it. A woman in a tailored gray suit stepped inside, holding a tablet and a leather folder. She looked to be about 50, with short silver hair and piercing eyes that assessed the entire room in a matter of seconds. Senor Reyes, she said, offering a professional nod to Camillo. Gabriela, give me the status. We have secured all the files, she reported. Financial records, employment contracts, and all the security footage from the last 6 months. The girls are currently being interviewed in separate, private rooms. We have also contacted our legal counsel and the local authorities to ensure that every step we take is documented properly. Good. What is the total number of girls? There are 23 currently on the premises. 19 are over the age of 18, Gabriella continued. 4 of them, she paused and glanced at Senor. 4 of them have serious discrepancies in their documentation. Camillo's expression darkened into something dangerous. What kind of discrepancies? We found identification cards that do not appear to match their stated ages. One girl who is claiming to be 22 has a birth certificate in her file that suggests she is actually 17. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Camillo turned very slowly to face Senor. You hired minors. No, absolutely not, Senor insisted, shaking his head. I checked every single piece of identification myself. If someone lied about their age, that is not my fault. You did not verify, Camillo stated. It was not a question, it was a verdict. I did. I have copies of everything. If someone brought me a fake ID, there was no way for me to know that. You did not verify, Camillo repeated, his voice now a deadly whisper, because you did not want to know. Senor opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. Gabriella cleared her throat. Should I contact the authorities about the minors immediately and get them somewhere safe? Arrange for medical exams, counseling, whatever they might need. I want a complete paper trail that shows we cooperated fully the very moment we discovered this problem. Understood, Gabriella replied. She turned and left, her heels clicking purposefully down the hallway. Camillo's gaze shifted to Olivia. Did you know about the young ones? He asked her. I suspected, she admitted in a small voice. There was one girl who just looked too young. I asked her once how old she was. She told me she was 19. But the way she said it, she looked like she was lying. Did you report it? Olivia gestured helplessly toward Senor. To whom? He ran the entire club. I was barely managing to hold on to my own job. Camillo nodded slowly, understanding her predicament. You did what you could. I feel like I should have done more. You survived, he told her. For now, that is enough. He walked to the door, then paused. I need you to write everything down for me. Every girl you remember who seemed like she was being coerced. Every conversation you overheard. Every threat you witnessed. Every single detail you can recall. Okay, she whispered. Gabriella will help you with it. Take all the time you need. Be thorough. He glanced back at Senor one last time, his face grim. And then, we are going to shut this entire place down, permanently. Senor's face went completely white. You cannot. This location generates... I was indifferent to the consequences. All that mattered was that everything stopped tonight. The interviews had already stretched for 4 agonizing hours. Olivia found herself in a compact room away from the main corridor, seated with Gabriella. She wrote down every memory she could salvage, the names, the faces, the hushed conversations in bathrooms and hidden stairwells. She remembered the girls who came filled with hope and later departed, completely broken. She recalled those who smiled to hide their tears, and the ones who eventually stopped smiling at all. After 60 minutes, her hand seized with a cramp, yet she pressed on, continuing to write. Gabriella posed questions, clarifying small details here and there, establishing timelines, and entering notes onto her tablet with quick, methodical taps. She never interrupted without reason, never hurried the process. She simply listened with the intense concentration of someone who had done this many times before. Beyond the room's door, Olivia could hear the sounds of movement, doors opening and closing, muffled voices, and the soft footsteps of people being guided through the building. Every single one of the girls was being interviewed in a separate room. Each was assigned a member from Camillo's professional team. The rule was simple. No one could depart until they provided a full statement. Just around midnight, Gabriella's phone vibrated. She looked down at the screen for a moment and then rose to her feet. I have to go check on something. Please keep writing. I will be right back. Olivia gave a slight nod, flexing her aching fingers before gripping the pen once more. She wrote about Beatrice, the girl who cried in the restroom one night and then vanished a month later. She wrote about Carla, who started as a cocktail waitress, but now served the VIP rooms with a vacant expression and a perfectly rehearsed smile. She described the young woman whose name she never managed to learn, who looked no older than 16, but swore she was 19. She detailed the evening Senor had trapped her in the dim storage room. His tone was deceptively friendly, but his intention was absolutely clear. You could be earning 3 times what you make now. Our customers are asking for you. You are wasting your potential. She documented how his behavior changed after her refusal. The shifts suddenly grew longer. Her tips began to mysteriously shrink. And other employees started to avoid her, as if her defiance were a disease they might catch. She wrote about the other women who had attempted to warn her. Just give him what he wants. It is so much easier that way. Resisting him only makes everything worse. She continued writing until her hand trembled uncontrollably and her vision blurred. Gabriella finally returned, carrying coffee and a sandwich that Olivia had no recollection of requesting. Please eat, Gabriella urged with a gentle voice. You have been doing this for several hours straight. Olivia accepted the coffee but found she had no appetite for the food. How many of the girls have you spoken to so far? She asked. We have talked to 17. There are 6 more left to interview. Gabriella's face tensed. And let me be clear, you were not the only one he targeted, not even close. That confirmation should have brought Olivia a sense of validation. Instead, a wave of exhaustion and sadness washed over her, mixed with anger at herself for not acting sooner when she had the chance. What about the young ones? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. All 4 of them are being moved to a secure safe house tonight. They have medical examinations scheduled for tomorrow. We have managed to contact their families where we could. Gabriella paused for a moment. 2 of those girls are from out of state. They were lured here online with false promises of careers in modeling. Olivia felt her stomach churn. Modeling. It was the standard language used in trafficking circles. The girls arrive full of hope. Their passports are taken from them, supposedly for safekeeping. Then, all of a sudden, they find themselves in debt for housing and travel expenses they never consented to. Gabriella's tone was clinical and professional, yet a deep anger simmered just below the surface. By the time they understand what is actually happening, they are completely trapped. Did Senor have any knowledge of this? He insists that he did not. But willful ignorance is not a valid defense when you are managing an establishment like this. He absolutely should have known. He simply made the choice not to look. Just then, the door swung open. Camillo entered the room. He was in the same suit, though his shirt was now more creased, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. He looked weary, but it was not a physical tiredness. It was something deeper, the sort of profound exhaustion that comes from witnessing things that can never be unseen. How is she holding up? He asked Gabriella. She has been exceptionally thorough. We have more than enough to build a very strong case. He nodded in acknowledgement, his gaze shifting to Olivia. I am going to need you to come with me. Her heart began to beat faster. To where? We are going upstairs. One of the other girls is refusing to speak to anyone unless you are present. Olivia carefully placed her pen on the table. Which girl is it? She would not provide her name. She only said that she knew you, and that you had been kind to her. Olivia slowly stood up, her legs feeling stiff after being seated for so long. She followed Camillo as he exited the room and led her down the hallway. They passed by security guards and members of the audit team who were moving through the building with the precision of surgeons excising an infection. They ascended the rear staircase, making their way to the 2nd floor. The hallway looked completely different now. It was empty and silent. Doors stood wide open, offering glimpses into rooms left in various stages of disarray. There were unmade beds, clothing strewn about, and makeup bags left abandoned on nightstands. The girls had all been relocated downstairs for their interviews. What was left behind felt like a crime scene, irrefutable proof of what this establishment truly was. Camillo paused at a door near the end of the hall, 3 doors down from where Olivia's own room had once been. He rapped lightly on the door. "It is me. I brought her with me." After a brief silence, a small voice answered. "Okay." Camillo pushed the door open. Inside, a girl Olivia knew instantly was perched on the edge of a narrow bed. She had a young face and dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a large sweatshirt, something that was definitely not part of the club's required attire. Her eyes, red from crying, looked up as they came in. "Olivia," she whispered. "Lucia." Olivia stepped further into the room, making sure to keep her voice soft and reassuring. "Are you all right?" Lucia just shook her head. "They keep asking me all these questions, and I have no idea what I should say. I am so scared of getting into trouble." "You are not in any trouble," Camillo stated from his position in the doorway. "We are here to help you." "But I lied when I filled out my application. I told them I was 21, but I am actually only 19. If I tell them the truth, they will find out I used a fake identification card." And so Olivia sat down on the bed next to her. "You are not going to be arrested over a fake ID. That is not what any of this is about." "So what is this truly about?" Olivia directed her gaze to Camo, who gave a subtle nod. It was permission for her to speak the unvarnished truth. "This is about making certain that what I went through never happens to another person," Olivia stated. "Senor is under investigation for exploitation, for coercing young women into services they never agreed to, and for cultivating a dangerously unsafe environment. We have to find out who else he has harmed." Lucia's fingers nervously intertwined in her lap. "I was not harmed. I chose this life." "Did you really?" Olivia asked with a gentle tone. "Or did you sign up to be a waitress and find yourself trapped here because there were no other doors open to you?" A heavy silence filled the space. Then, in a quiet voice, Lucia admitted, "He told me I was not earning enough in tips. He said I was a financial drain on the club, and if I wanted to keep my job, I had to start contributing in a different way." "When did this happen?" "About 2 months ago, just after you began turning down the requests for the private rooms." Lucia's eyes met hers, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I witnessed what he did to you. I saw how he treated you after you told him no. So, the moment he approached me, I offered no resistance. I just agreed." A knot formed in Olivia's throat. "I am so deeply sorry. None of this is your fault. What you did was courageous. I was not brave, I had to have this job. I desperately needed the income. My mother is ill, and I have to wire money back to my family every single week. If I were to lose this position, I had no idea what would become of us." "Where is home for you?" Camo inquired. "Bahia. It is a very small town. There is no work there. That is the reason I moved to the city." "And Senor was aware of this, was he not?" Lucia nodded slowly. He knew every person's story. He knew precisely who was desperate, who was drowning in debt, and who simply could not afford to refuse him. Her voice became a barely audible whisper. That was his method for choosing his victims. The room fell into a deep quiet. Camillo took out his phone and typed a few words. When he looked up again, his voice was measured and carefully controlled. "Lucia, I am about to ask you something, and I need you to answer with complete honesty. Did Senor, or any other person at this club, ever use physical force against you? Number. Not force, exactly. But what?" But he made it absolutely clear that refusal was not a genuine option. He made it known that women who failed to cooperate did not remain employed for long. And I saw firsthand what became of those who attempted to quit before their time was up. Their final pay was always withheld. Their professional references would suddenly vanish. One woman tried to file a report against him, and suddenly she was unable to find employment anywhere in the entire city. He had her blacklisted. I do not know the official term for it. I just know that she was forced to return to her hometown with absolutely nothing. Camilo's jaw clenched. He turned his head to look at Olivia. Were you aware of any of this? I had heard whispers, but I never saw any definitive proof. He nodded once, slowly, before turning his attention back to Lucia. I need you to document everything you have just shared with me. The names of any other women who were pressured, any clients who were abusive, and anyone who assisted Senor in this entire operation. Are you able to do that? Lucia wavered. What happens to me after this is over? After this, the club is shut down for good. Senor will face serious legal consequences, and you will receive all the money you are owed, along with substantial compensation for what you endured. And what happens then? Where am I supposed to go? You can go anywhere you choose. I will personally ensure you have more than enough to build a new life for yourself. Somewhere secure, somewhere very far from this place. Lucia looked from him to Olivia. Can I trust him? Olivia's mind flashed to the deserted club downstairs. She thought of the audit team, working silently. She remembered how Camo had systematically destroyed Senor's confidence in a matter of minutes. And she recalled how he had stopped his car in a downpour for a complete stranger who had absolutely nothing to give him. Yes, she said with certainty. I believe him. Lucia drew in a shaky breath. All right. I will write it all down for you. By 3 o'clock in the morning, the Eclipse Lounge resembled an active crime scene. Not from any act of violence, because there had been none, but from the sheer volume of evidence the investigation had brought to light. Boxes of files were stacked high in the hallway just outside Senor's office. The glow of laptop screens illuminated every flat surface. Gabriella's team moved with quiet efficiency, cross-referencing ledgers, flagging inconsistencies, and constructing a legal case that would be impossible to dismantle in court. Olivia sat by herself in the main lounge area, observing the entire operation unfold. The vibrant neon signs had all been switched off, and the fog machine was still. Without the pulse of the music, the energy of the crowds, and the manufactured excitement, the room felt diminished and sorrowful, like a theater stage after the final curtain has fallen. Camo was standing near the bar, his phone held firmly to his ear, speaking in rapid Portuguese to someone on the other end who was clearly unhappy with what they were hearing. His tone was calm, but completely inflexible. It is final. I do not care what the revenue projections were showing. I do not care what approvals you gave 3 years ago. This entire operation is terminated tonight. No, there will be no discussion, because I am the owner of the building, and I am informing you that it is finished. He disconnected the call without bothering to wait for a reply. Gabriella came toward him, holding a tablet. We have finished conducting all the interviews. We spoke with 23 women in total. 14 of them were hired based on false pretenses or were coerced into performing services that were not in their original contracts. 4 are underage. The other 5 maintain that they entered into this arrangement of their own free will. But 2 of those women are exhibiting signs that indicate they are victims of trafficking. What kind of signs are you seeing? Debt bondage. One of the women owes the club 30,000 reais for housing and so-called training fees that she insists she never consented to. Another one had her passport taken from her the day she arrived from Colombia. She has not seen it since that day. Camo's face grew darker. Where are their documents now? They are locked inside Senor's desk. We discovered 12 passports in total. Only 6 of them belong to women who are currently employed here, and the other 6 are unaccounted for. They could belong to women who have already left, or it could be something much worse. The sinister implication lingered in the silent room. Camo placed his phone on the counter. I want a complete forensic accounting of every single transaction for the past 3 years. Every payment made to the women, every charge to a client, every single expense. If there is any money missing, I demand to know its destination. It is already underway, but Senor maintained two separate sets of books, one for official records and one that was hidden. We are currently working to break through the encrypted files as we speak. How much longer? A couple more hours, possibly less time than that. Camo nodded. And what is the status with Senor? He is still secured in his office. He has demanded to speak with a lawyer. He can demand anything he likes. He is not setting foot outside of this building until we have acquired every piece of information we need. Gabriella's eyes flicked over to Olivia, then back to Camo. There is something more that you need to be aware of. What is it? Three of the women made mention of a regional manager who comes to visit once every month. He collects cash payments and never provides his name. They all described him as an older man, always well-dressed, with a noticeable scar on his left hand. Camillo became perfectly still. Augusto. You are familiar with him? He was supposed to be supervising all the operations in this district, ensuring that every location remained clean, legal, and profitable. His voice was as cold as ice. Instead, he was taking protection money and deliberately ignoring what was happening. Should I include him in the scope of the investigation? Include him in everything. I want to know about every property he oversees, every transaction he has been involved in, every single person he has corrupted. If he is running this scheme here, then he is undoubtedly doing it in other places as well. Gabriella made a quick note on her tablet. This is going to become much larger than just one club. I am aware. Camillo surveyed the empty, quiet space. That is precisely why this has to be done thoroughly. If I only clean up a single location but ignore the others, all I am doing is relocating the problem. I have to burn the entire network to the ground and then rebuild it the right way. Olivia observed him from her seat across the room. It was clear that this was a man who had constructed an empire. She could see it in the disciplined way his team operated, the way they deferred to his authority without a single hesitation, and the way one brief phone call could completely empty a building. Yet he was also the same man who had stopped his car in the middle of a rainstorm for a weeping woman he did not even know. She could not figure him out. Perhaps that was the entire point. Gabriella departed to coordinate with the forensics team. Camillo walked over to where Olivia was sitting, his hands pushed into his pockets, the first signs of deep exhaustion finally visible around his eyes. You should be heading home, he told her. I no longer have a home. He stopped for a moment. Right, I had forgotten. That is all right. I can just wait here until… No. You have already provided us with everything we required. What remains now is just the process of documentation. He took out his phone again, typing something quickly. I am arranging a room for you at a hotel, somewhere that is clean and secure. You need to get some rest. I do not want your charity. This is not charity. It is payment for professional services rendered. You have effectively been working as a consultant for us for the past 6 hours. He turned the phone screen toward her. It showed a confirmation of a bank transfer. 50,000 reais. That is the amount I promised you. I also added another 20,000 for your assistance with the interviews tonight. Olivia could only stare at the number. 70,000 reais. It was more money than she had earned in the last 2 years combined. I cannot possibly accept this. You already have. The funds are in your account. What account? I never gave you my banking information. Gabriella retrieved it from Señor's employee files. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. Consider all of it as back pay for the 8 months of misery you endured from his abuse. Olivia's hands began to tremble. This is far too much money. It is not nearly enough, but it is a beginning. He motioned to one of the security guards positioned near the entrance. Raphael will escort you to the hotel. You can stay there for as long as you need. When you feel ready to decide what you want to do next, you can call me. He gave her a business card. It was made of heavy paper stock with embossed letters, showing only a name and a telephone number. What if I decide not to call? Olivia challenged him. Then you do not call. The money is yours regardless of your choice. You have no obligation to me. Why are you doing all of this for me? Camillo studied her for a long, silent moment. Because you chose to walk away from everything you had rather than compromise the person you are. Most people do not possess that kind of inner strength. Those who do, they deserve to be protected, not to be punished for it. I am not anyone special. You just walked out into the rain with no destination rather than sell a piece of yourself. In my world, that makes you truly extraordinary. He took a small step back. Raphael will see to your needs. Get some proper sleep. We can speak tomorrow if you would like to, or we can speak never again. The choice is entirely yours. He started to turn and walk away. Camillo. He paused in his tracks. What is going to happen to all the other girls? The ones who have no place to go? The very same thing that is happening to you, he replied. Money, safe housing, practical assistance, help finding a job if they want it, and access to therapy if they need it. Nobody gets left on the street. Not under my supervision. Not ever again. And what about Señor? Camillo's expression became rigid. Señor is about to learn that stealing money from me is a very expensive mistake. But stealing a woman's dignity? He shook his head slowly. That is going to cost him absolutely everything he has. Olivia knew he meant it. Raphael materialized by her side. He was young and professional, dressed in the same dark suit as the other security personnel. Are you ready, Señora? She rose to her feet, her legs still feeling wobbly from sitting for such a long time. Her uniform had finally dried, but it was still creased and carried the lingering smell of the club. She felt a powerful urge to burn it. As Raphael escorted her toward the main exit, Olivia glanced back one final time. Camillo was standing at the bar, his phone pressed to his ear once again. He was issuing orders that would send shockwaves through his entire network, aimed at dismantling corruption, insisting on accountability, and burning away the broken parts so that something better could take their place. He had stopped for her in the pouring rain, not because he was a kind man, though perhaps he was in his own particular way. He had stopped because he lived by a certain set of standards, lines that he would never allow to be crossed. He had rules that even the most powerful men were expected to follow. And when someone broke those rules, he did not turn a blind eye. He took decisive action. Outside, the rain had finally ceased. The sky was gradually starting to lighten. It was not quite dawn, but it was getting close. The city appeared transformed in the gray pre-dawn light, seeming quieter and almost serene. Raphael held the door open to a black sedan. It was not the same sport utility vehicle from earlier, but it was very similar. Clean, expensive, and safe. The hotel is about 20 minutes from here, he informed her. You can get some sleep in the car if you would like. Olivia slid onto the back seat, placing her canvas bag beside her. Inside it was the proof of 70,000 reais in an account she had hardly ever touched. As the car pulled away from the Eclipse Lounge, she watched the building diminish in the side view mirror. The bright neon sign was now completely dark. The front doors were securely locked. Inside, Camillo's team was systematically taking the entire place apart piece by piece. By the following day, it would be as if it had never existed. And Olivia Peters, a waitress, a woman who refused to be broken, a survivor, would wake up in a fresh, clean bed, with more than enough money to build a new life. Somewhere far away from this city, somewhere secure, somewhere of her own choosing. Dawn arrived over the city like a slowly spreading bruise, a mix of purple and gray that bled into a pale yellow along the horizon. Olivia woke up in a hotel room that smelled of lavender and fresh linens. For a fleeting second, she could not remember where she was. Then, the memories of the previous night rushed back in a flood. The rain, the large sport utility vehicle, Camillo's face, partially hidden in the shadows, the Eclipse Lounge being systematically dismantled. She sat upright in bed and checked her phone. The screen read 7:43 in the morning. There were missed calls from a number she did not recognize. A text message from Gabriella was waiting for her. The investigation is now complete. Please call me when you wake up. Olivia dialed the number. Gabriella picked up on the very first ring. How did you manage to sleep? Better than I have slept in many months, she answered. That is good to hear. Are you able to come back to the club? There is something that Senor Reyes wants you to witness. 20 minutes later, Raphael was driving her back through the congested morning traffic. The city had a different feel in the bright daylight, less threatening and more detached. Just a landscape of concrete and glass filled with people hurrying to jobs that would slowly wear them down. When they pulled up to the Eclipse, Olivia could hardly recognize the place. The flashy neon sign was completely gone, leaving behind only empty mounting brackets and dangling wires. The front windows were plastered with official government notices, citations, orders of closure, and documents of seizure. A small crowd of onlookers had formed on the sidewalk. Neighbors were whispering to each other, trying to piece together what had transpired. Raphael guided her in through a side entrance. Inside, the club had been reduced to a mere skeleton. The bar was completely stripped, all the bottles had been removed, the glassware was packed away, and even the large mirrors had been taken down from the walls. The disc jockey booth stood empty, and the entire VIP section had been completely dismantled. Men in work uniforms were tearing out the old carpets, revealing the stained concrete floor below. Camillo stood right in the middle of the dance floor, watching the destruction like a general surveying a battlefield after a long siege. He finally turned as Olivia walked in. "You came. Gabriella mentioned you wanted to see me. I wanted you to witness this," he said, gesturing to the gutted-out room. "I needed you to know this is real. This place is never coming back." Olivia moved slowly across the space, past the empty bar where she had worked for 8 miserable months, and past the hallway leading to the stairs she had been forced to climb every single night. Everything that felt so permanent just 12 hours ago was now being systematically erased. "Where are the other girls?" she asked. "They are in safe houses, some in hotels. 3 of them went back home to their families. 2 others have meetings with social services this afternoon. All the minors are now with Child Protection Services." He paused for a moment. "Lucia was asking about you. She wanted me to make sure you were okay. I really should call her. She would like that very much." Camillo took out his phone and typed something quickly. "I just sent you her number." Just then, Gabriella came out of the back office holding a large box filled with files. She set it down with care. "The final count is 147,000 reais in unreported cash. There is another 200,000 in wages they never paid, plus fabricated debt payments." "And what about the señor?" Olivia asked. "Is he being transferred to federal custody within the hour?" Gabriella confirmed. "He is facing charges for money laundering, human trafficking, coercion, and fraud. He will be incredibly lucky if he sees daylight again in the next 10 years. What will happen to the regional manager, Augusto?" Camilo's face grew hard and cold. "He is next on the list. We have already identified 6 other locations that were operating in the exact same way. All of them were under his direct supervision, and all of them were generating profit through exploitation." 6. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper, much smaller than she had intended. 6 that we have found so far. The full audit is still ongoing." He looked straight at her. "This problem is much bigger than just one club, Olivia. It is a systemic issue, and it is going to end right now." One of the workers walked over, holding a clipboard. "Senor Reyes, the demolition team is ready to go. Do we have your authorization to proceed?" Olivia asked. "Proceed with what?" Camilo's jaw was set tight. "A complete structural renovation. We are gutting the entire second floor. Every single room, every single wall, every surface that was used to hurt people is being removed. You are tearing it all down. I am erasing it completely." His voice was like steel. "When this building reopens, if it ever reopens, it will be something totally different. Something clean. The Eclipse Lounge dies today." The worker stood by, waiting for his final confirmation. Camillo gave a sharp nod. "Start with the rooms upstairs. I want them to be the first things gone." The worker turned and left. A few moments later, the deep thud of sledgehammers began to echo throughout the building. The sound of crumbling walls and falling debris marked the physical destruction of what had been a prison for so many women. Olivia felt a tight knot in her chest finally begin to loosen. Thank you. Do not thank me. You were the one who had the strength to say no. I am just finally doing the thing I should have done many years ago. I am finally paying attention. You did not know what was really happening here. I should have known. That failure is on me. He took a thick envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. This belongs to you. Inside, there were official documents, legal papers, and a property deed. Olivia's hands started to shake as she looked at them. What is all this? It is the building where you were living before you came to the eclipse. I purchased it this morning. You now have an apartment there. It is paid for 1 full year. After that, it is yours to keep if you still want it. I cannot accept this. This is far too much. It is not a gift, he insisted. It is restitution. His voice became a little softer. You lost your home because I failed to properly monitor my own business operations. This is how I make it right. Tears started to burn behind Olivia's eyes. Why are you doing all of this for me? Camilla was quiet for a long moment. My sister was trafficked when she was only 19 years old. She was promised a good job at a restaurant in Sao Paulo. She ended up in a situation that was not very different from yours. But she did not have the strength you had to say no. And by the time I finally found her, his voice trailed off into a painful silence. I was too late. She is still alive, but she is not the same person. She will never be the same person again. I am so sorry. After that, I swore to myself I would never let something like that happen again. Not in any business that I controlled. Not on my watch. He looked around at the wreckage of the demolished club. I failed her, but I will not fail a second time. The sound of the sledgehammers continued their work upstairs. It was a strangely satisfying sound, almost cleansing. What will happen to you now? Camilo asked. Olivia thought about the new apartment, the money that was now in her account, and the future that had suddenly opened up in front of her like a door she believed was locked forever. I do not know, she said, but now I get to choose, and that is more than enough. Camilo almost allowed himself to smile. Yes, he said. It is. The apartment was small, but it was perfectly clean. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen with actual counter space, and big windows that let in real warm sunlight. Olivia stood in the middle of the empty living room, her small canvas bag on the floor next to her, trying to accept that this entire space was hers. Here, no walls were shared with exploitation. No thumping music could bleed through the drywall at 3 in the morning. In this hallway, no men loitered, making proposals that were never really proposals. There was only quiet, and with it came safety and the power of choice. Her phone vibrated against the table. It was Lucia. Hello, Olivia? The young woman's voice was thin and hesitant. Gabriella gave me your number. I hope you do not mind. Of course not. How are you doing? I am scared, but I am better. I think they are placing me in a program. It has job training and counseling. They promised they would help me find real work. That is wonderful. That is truly wonderful news. A brief silence hung between them. I needed to thank you. For what? For being there with me last night. For speaking the truth even when it was so difficult. I never would have said anything if you were not there. Olivia felt a tightness in her own throat. Yes, you would have. You are much stronger than you believe. I do not feel strong. I did not either, but we both made it through. That has to mean something. Lucia let out a shaky breath. They arrested Senor this morning. Did you know? I heard, Olivia said. Good. I hope he rots in a cell. The poison in Lucia's voice was something new, something healthy. I hope every single one of them rots. They will, Olivia assured her. Camilo is making certain of that. That man is kind of terrifying. A small smile touched Olivia's lips against her will. Yes, he is, but in a good way. Their conversation continued for a few more minutes. They made uncertain plans to get coffee sometime soon. They exchanged promises to stay in touch. It was the delicate start of something that could grow into a real friendship. When Lucia finally ended the call, Olivia felt a little less alone in the world. She dedicated the remainder of the day to making the small apartment feel like a sanctuary. A visit to a thrift store provided a mattress, clean sheets, and a few basic plates and cups. A trip to the market filled her refrigerator with actual food, a stark contrast to the scraps and leftovers she had survived on at the club. As evening fell, the small space was beginning to feel like a home. Her phone rang once more. The screen showed an unknown number. "Hello, Olivia Peters," a woman's voice said. It was professional, but also warm. "Yes? My name is Dr. Carvalho. I am a therapist, and I specialize in trauma recovery. Senor Reyes asked that I get in touch with you. He has made arrangements for counseling services if you find that you are interested. There is no pressure and no obligation. It is simply an available option." Olivia sank down slowly onto her newly acquired second-hand couch. He had done that for her. Yes, he did. He is also covering all of the costs. Your only task is to decide if this is something you want to do. Yes, I believe I do. Wonderful. I have an available appointment tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Would that time work for you? Yes, thank you so much. After she disconnected the call, Olivia remained on the couch in the deepening twilight, watching the city lights begin to sparkle to life beyond her window. She considered how radically her world had shifted in just the last 24 hours. She thought about how narrowly she had avoided simply vanishing. She reflected on how a single question, "What happened?" had managed to alter the course of everything. The first therapy session proved to be more difficult than Olivia had anticipated. Dr. Carvalho posed questions that carefully peeled back the layers of denial she had built up for protection. They talked about personal boundaries, about acts of survival, and about the vast difference between making a choice and having no choice at all. "You did nothing wrong," Dr. Carvalho stated with gentle authority. "You do understand that, do you not?" Olivia was not entirely certain that she did, but she was beginning to believe it was possible. She departed the session feeling emotionally exposed, but also strangely unburdened, as if she had finally set down a heavy weight she had not even known she was carrying. On her walk home, she took a route that led her past the Eclipse Lounge. The building was almost unrecognizable. Teams of construction workers were busy all over its exterior. The lurid pink and blue neon signs were completely gone, and in their place stood clean white scaffolding. A large banner announced a future development. "Community Resource Center, opening fall 2026. Olivia stopped in her tracks. A resource center. It was not going to be another club or some other kind of business. It was going to be a place that would genuinely help people. She took out her phone, located Camillo's number in her contacts, and placed the call before her own doubt could stop her. He picked up on the first ring. "Olivia, I take it you saw the sign at the Eclipse? A resource center? Job training? Legal aid? Counseling services for individuals who need a new beginning." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. It seemed fitting. "It is. It is absolutely perfect. I am glad you feel that way, because I would like you to help me run it." Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. "What?" "You understand what it is like to be desperate for help and have nowhere to find it. You know exactly how the systems fail people. Your perspective would be invaluable in ensuring this place actually does what it is meant to do." "But I am not qualified." "You are more qualified than you can possibly realize. Just think about it. There is no pressure." She stood there on the sidewalk, gazing at the very building that had nearly consumed her life. Now it was being remade into something that could rescue others. "Okay," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I will think about it." By the time she hung up, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the entire sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Olivia Peters walked home to an apartment that belonged to her, with money in an account that she alone controlled, and with a future full of options that she was free to choose. She walked with her back straight and her head held high. There were no tears. The rain had finally stopped, and she had made it through. She had not just survived. She had refused to be broken. She had refused to compromise her spirit. She had refused to accept that cruelty was simply the price of being alive. It started with one woman walking alone in the rain. It changed with one man who had the decency to stop and ask a question. An entire corrupt system crumbled because one person finally stood up and demanded accountability. Some people get lost in the storm and are never seen again. Others manage to change the world because someone cared enough to ask why they were standing in the rain in the first place. Olivia Peters had done both, and her journey was only just beginning. Here is what this story teaches us. Your boundaries are not negotiable. When the world pressures you to compromise who you are just to survive, the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground and say no. Olivia lost everything the night she refused: her job, her room, her only sense of security. But that single act of defiance is what ultimately saved her life and brought an entire corrupt empire crashing down. And remember this: sometimes the person who changes everything is not a hero with a plan. It is simply someone brave enough to ask, "What happened to you?" Never be afraid to draw the line, and never underestimate the impact of showing up for someone when the rest of the world looks away. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to its conclusion. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it made you feel something real, please take just 1 second to hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Olivia's place? Would you have gotten into that car? I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Tap that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. And if someone you know needs to hear this message today, share this video with them. One click could change someone's entire perspective. If you are ready for another emotional journey, go ahead and tap the next video appearing on your screen right now. I promise you, it will be worth every second. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and real value to our audience.